All right. Without further ado, let's get started. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where in the globe you're tuning in from. Welcome to this ECOSOC Youth Forum side event entitled Building Youth Partnerships to Advance the SDGs and Build Back Better. This event today is brought to you by UNICEF, UN Volunteers, Generation Unlimited, and UNDP. My name is Vicky Aridi, Youth Engagement Specialist for Joint SDG Fund and Young People Action Team member for Generation Unlimited, and I will be just one of your facilitators for this session. Before we get started, it would be quite prudent to have a quick snippet of what this session is about. Now we're talking about a sustainable future and achieving the SDGs. That brings to mind that we need all stakeholders and more so young people. Why young people? Because they are the world's greatest assets. They are the leaders of today, not tomorrow. They understand today's challenges and have ambition, passion, and such drive to create relevant solutions. They therefore must not be left behind, and we must be treated as equitable partners when we're talking about developing partnerships to overcome the challenges that we face brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic, and because we have about 8 years left to achieve the SDGs. With that in mind today, we have an interactive, engaging, I hope you're ready to engage with the speakers. We have top tier speakers here today to really discuss how can we together build equitable partnerships that put young people at the center, at the driving seat to really achieve the SDGs, in particular SDG 4 on quality education, SDG 5 on gender equality, SDG 14, SDG 15, and SDG 17. So we're talking about life on land, life below water, and sustainable partnerships, really. So a few housekeeping rules before we begin. This is an engaging session, as we mentioned at the start. So feel free to give your contributions, comments, questions, and suggestions on the chat and using the Q&A below. We will then sample them and direct them to the right respondent. Also, let us know that you're joining this session via social media and feel free to tag us. So now we're shifting gear to SDG 5. And now on SDG 5, we're looking at how can we build youth partnerships to advance gender equality. And I can tell you it's a powerhouse here today to unpack this. So we have Taibat. Taibat is a gender specialist for the Bill and Melinda Gates funded PAWED project and also is a global GenU YPAD member. We have Anna Isabel, Youth Innovation and Adolescent Participation Associate at UNICEF Guatemala, and Miss Aliyah, Special Staff for Millennium Creativity and Innovation at the Ministry of Youth and Sport in the Republic of Indonesia. So without further ado, let's get started. I told you we have quite a lot to unpack today. So I'd start the discussion with Taibat. Taibat, from where you sit and your experience, how are young women and young men in Nigeria impacted differently by the pandemic?
Thank you so much, Vicky. I often say something that in a world where gender disparity seems to be the norm, it is not surprising that we can find gender perspectives to virtually every challenge and situation we face as human beings. The impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on women in Nigeria is one that has worsened the social, economic, and cultural issues that already affect young women in the country. Before the pandemic, young women already face specific obstacles in accessing the same opportunities as men. Generally, women earn less, they save less, and take fewer economic risks. However, the pandemic made it even more difficult for young business owners, especially those who are females and operate in the traditionally male-dominated industries to access funding. According to the Face Institute of State of Entrepreneurship in Nigeria report, 43% of businesses are owned by female. On one hand, this signals progress, but on the other hand, there is the uneven impact that the pandemic had on these female-owned businesses. Over 34% of them did not record growth, during the pandemic year, with limited access to funding being their major constraint to growth. We also know that both employers and government did not implement policies that would be friendly to women who work, and the social institutions that can provide the needed support for working women are unavailable. Also, before the pandemic, there had been recorded progress in terms of girls' education, with the number of girls dropping out of schools reducing by 79 million. This number is a result of, effort taken on girls' education over a period of 20 years. Then the pandemic came and it might have decreased this number by another 20 million, setting us back by years. Indeed, it is another pandemic within a pandemic. Yet, this was not just the only pandemic that women had to battle during the COVID-19. There was also the shadow pandemic of gender-based violence, more specifically intimate partner violence, sexual violence, child abuse, all of which rose dramatically as abusers and victims remain confined in the same space. There's this popular case of Alima Bulama, whose husband chopped her hand for disobeying him to attend a ceremony. It's so unfortunate, but Alima's story, unfortunately, is a common one that is repeated in several forms across several places in the country. Vicky, there are several instances to last us the entire length of this conversation. The facts speak for themselves. There is no question to whether women were differently affected by the pandemic. The conversation at this point that we should be talking about is how are we addressing these issues and preferring lasting solutions such that whatever destruction that we might face next does not disproportionately affect the lives of young women in Nigeria and globally. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Taibat. In fact, you said, and that will be a question we'll come back to, how can we address these issues and really build back better? Because you've mentioned how young women were affected when it came to their businesses, when it came to education, more so the shadow pandemic that most of us know about, gender-based violence. So we'll need to unpack that shortly. So coming to you, Anna Isabel, and just wanted to hear your view on how can gender responsive policies impact the effectiveness of partnerships and really increase youth involvement and participation. Over to you, Anna Isabel.
Thank you, Vicky. I think in my experience, gender responsive policies can provide an opportunity for young girls to express their needs and to seek an answer for them, giving them the opportunity to amplify their voice in the local context and national context. It is a tool that can open a window to amplify to the most vulnerable, to hear their voice and play a key role in their communities. For example, in 2017, in Guatemala, there was a law that allowed 14-year-old girls to get married, although for the boys, the minimum age was 16. In rural communities, this law increased problematics like early unions and child marriage, adolescent pregnancies, girls out of school, and violence. For Stephanie, a 14 indigenous girl, this was a huge problem, giving her three priorities in life were study, study, and study. So she started to promote the initiative 18 Yes and 14 No in her communities. In supporting this initiative, she was able to actually speak up in a conservative community and to participate as a young girl in an adolescence and youth associations, expressing her point of view about this problematic and seeking a change for her and her friends. And with this, the support of UNICEF, she was able to reach high authorities and actually change the minimum age for both sexes to 18 years old. I believe when we take in consideration the gender analysis at the earliest possible stage of any intervention we do, like program or activity, we can actually shape and design a plan that can actually be useful for young girls in any intervention we do.
Thank you so much, Anna. You've spoken to something very critical. The need to also do gender analysis before we do interventions so that even right at the start, we can already start to address these issues of gender equality and more so ensure effective participation, more so of young women. So thank you so much for that. Now, I'd like to shift gear to Miss Aliyah and just to hear from you from where you sit. How are young people in Indonesia building alliances with the government to advance and scale up solutions for sustainable recovery and SDGs, especially in the world that we know that's been shaped by COVID-19? Over to you, Ms. Alia.
Thank you, Vicky. The COVID-19 pandemic has greatly negatively impacted all of our lives, and specifically for the population in the productive ages, which is the youth, us, the impact is also very extensive. Many has lost their jobs, many has to suspend and readapt their educational activities, and many has to bear the burden of supporting their loved ones and their families. However, the youth also plays a very eminent role to support the recovery process from the pandemic. We are unique not only in terms of age, but also in terms of productivity and idealism. We are able to contribute in the recovery process in many ways, such as becoming initiator and collaborator. The youth can contribute to recovery through various programs such as institutional and organizational initiatives, much like what I am a part of. And through the right approach, we can find a place to be heard and be active. In my experience, the Indonesian youth has a great passion through their participation to make a huge difference. Many youth-led organizations, such as the one that I'm a part of, have done great works during this pandemic with regards to vaccine distribution, fundraising programs, and publication campaigns. And a lot of youth in Indonesia have even participated in COVID-19 as volunteers, as healthcare workers, and other frontline people. The youth can take part in a few main roles, such as the promoter, using social media networks, educational institutions, and various community programs to promote health protocols and vaccinations. Fundraiser, creating online fundraisers program to help those affected by the pandemic. Inventor, creating new technology for methods of detection, prevention, and even psychological assistance. And hoax preventer, which helps prevent the spread of misinformation and anti-hoax campaign. On gender equality and women empowerment, all across the world, reports have noted how the COVID-19 pandemic have disproportionately impacted women. And it is significantly increasing the burden of unpaid care, which is disproportionately carried by women. And with inequitable access to finance, training, and technology, the potential of young women to uplift their communities all often goes unrealized. And it's very important to particularly focus to women in the recovery process, especially young women. So we should not only focus on protection of women, but also the participation and leadership. Women are vulnerable, not because we are weak, but also oftentimes patriarchal values are still widely embraced by the community, which narrows our access to participate and enjoy the benefits of development. Women has and continues to play key roles in the recovery process. We have encouraged each other to collaborate, and even a lot of women have to end up becoming entrepreneurs to support their families and their loved ones. We need to support, strengthen, and mobilize various youth networks, especially with young women in the front as leaders. I think the government of Indonesia has done a great job of that by providing various leadership and key strategic positions in the government for women, such as the position that I hold right now. We need the Youth Network and Movement Indonesia stands ready to support the greater solidarity and network of youth in the region and even at international levels. To be able to realize gender equality requires the cooperation from all parties, from the central, local, private parties, community institutions, and of course, women themselves. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Alia. One quote you said is that you really have to ensure that it's no longer just about protection, but women's participation and leadership. And really, you also touched a bit on some of the challenges women face when we talk about unpaid care that in some contexts is not taken as work, which is very, very critical. I see we're about to wind the discussion, so just a gentle reminder to keep engaging with us in the chat. And maybe I'd like to pose this question to all the panelists, and we can start in the order you spoke. From where you sit, what are the best practices in building partnerships that place young people, more so young women, at the center? So we can start with you, Taibat, then move to Anna Isabel, then Miss Alia. If you could just say very briefly some of the best practices. Over to you, Taibat.
Thank you so much, Vicky. Partnership should be anchored on the principle of inclusion and equalities in terms of value. And as I said earlier and other speakers, the pandemic affected young women the most. As such, deliberate efforts towards actualizing the last goal of the SDG with a gender lens should be pushed for by all holistically to harness the democratic dividends, build resilience, and also transform the society. Young people, and most especially women, should be given a seat and a voice at the table. So the best practices in building such partnerships should be based on shared value, partnership parameters, ensuring adequate training, evaluation, and timely communication. These best practices have been tested and worked. The DRPC-powered model that supports young women by bringing youth-led and youth-focused organizations to form a coalition to advance young women's economic empowerment in Nigeria is a case in point. As a senior technical advisor on the project, we have supported young women to document the issues that they are facing and translate this issue into key advocacy acts towards preferring solutions to these challenges that they are faced with. We are doing this by leaving no one behind. We are partnering with the government, women's economic collectives, youth associations, individual women champions to push for evidence-based policies that will increase the salience of women's economic empowerment in Nigeria. Having young women at the heart of this project has translated to results, as no one knows how these issues affect young people than young people themselves. Another enviable example that I do make reference to is the Gen U Young People's Action Team, because when we allow ourselves as young people to come together to build ourselves in terms of capacity, to forge strong voices using various platforms, we're already as close to the change that we want to see. So partnership employ a strength plus strength approach. And the goal is for us all to leverage on our particular strengths to achieve the results that we desire.
Thank you, Taibat. You mentioned leverage on our particular strength. Women should have a seat and a voice. And when we're looking at the SDGs, always maintain the gender lens. So maybe, Anna Isabel, if you could just share in one sentence, what's that one best practice you'd like to share with us when we're building partnerships that place young women at the center?
Yes, for us, one of the best practice has been working with youth partnerships in vulnerable contexts. Through youth partnership, we can actually reach the girls and population who does not have the opportunity to speak up, who is out of school, or who does not have access to health services or protection services. And with youth partnership, we can also address forbidden topics or taboo topics for close communities like sexuality, HIV, violence, and actually inform young girls about all these needs and the rights so they can actually become agents of change in their own spaces.
Thank you so much. For young girls to be agents of change, that's powerful. And for you, Miss Alia, maybe in just one sentence as we wind down, could you share with us a best practice in building partnerships with young people, more so young women, from the Indonesian government where you sit?
Okay, I think it definitely starts with the relationship between one young woman to another, as opposed to tearing each other down. I think it's best that we learn to support one another in whatever endeavor that we are going for. We also need to continuously promote collaborative efforts from all aspects of government, from local to national, international, from the private sector and all that. We need to realize that the importance of using each other's areas of expertise to achieve a common goal, which is to push the gender equality agenda. And also we need to push women to be more confident, to be more aware of the situation happening around us, so that we can invoke change in our own communities. And we need to fabricate a system of networks with actors and women in different expertise and skills.
Thank you so much. The relationship begins from one woman to another. Support one another. I think that's a powerful takeaway. So thank you so much, Taibat. Thank you so much, Miss Miss Aliyah, and thank you so much, Anna, for that. So please keep engaging in the chat. Don't go anywhere. We still have two powerful and exciting sessions coming up on SDG 14, 15, and 17. And I've been your moderator, Vicky Aridi, and now we're shifting gear to our next moderator and facilitator for the next sessions.